Well, hello, everybody. We are back for another lightning zone. And this time we're going to be discussing some power shuffles.
Yep, we're going to share our faves with you on power shuffles. And what is a power shuffle, you may ask? And we are going to tell you. So, in the story code, we track all the ways power moves in a story. We want to know who's got it, who wants it, what are people willing to do to keep or get it, and how it shifts from the beginning of the story all the way to the end. And a power shuffle is the teeniest little movement of power. So we have bigger power shuffles where people switch sides and allegiances, but a shuffle is just what it sounds like. It's a little shuffle. And it's often how we make change in our lives. We often shuffle a step or two ahead, and then we might back shuffle a little too. And hopefully we're making our way along as we go to create change in our lives. So, and as we make better choices and changes, we gain personal power. So because it's our faves week, we are going to each share an example of one of our favorite examples from a movie of a power shuffle. What's your favorite example, Amy?
So I love it because it's such a huge, over the arc of the entire story, such a huge change. And I can see just everybody really identifying with this. And this is in Groundhog Day with
Yes.
Bill. Um, because, if you follow his path, they're just little tiny things, little tiny steps that he makes as he goes, and he does go backwards as well.
A
uh
lot.
right, I know,
Yeah.
and we see that painfully, because he starts with the uncertainty. Oh, what, you said that yesterday. And then, he quickly goes into hedonism. I can do anything I want to do kind of stuff. And it's just, there's no more rules, no more consequences, right? So he can,
Yes. So are you saying all those hedonistic choices are shuffles backwards?
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
thinking they're
I would agree.
definitely kind of going down that moral reasoning scale there, because moral reasoning is very tied to those shuffles we see, people going up or down, and the fact that there's no consequences. He goes right down to pretty much a level zero. I can get away with anything and I have no consequences, and I can, so I will. A very young child,
Yes. As
right?
low as you can go.
Right. Um, then he goes into, oh, I've got Rita's list of what she likes. I will, just like that, I'll be everything that she wants to be on her list. But you'll notice that he's not actually become that person. He's just pretending. And guess what? It does not work. It doesn't work. So he's like, oh, okay. So he's a little, like, maybe I need to act normative, even if I'm not normative. So that's another little step up. Then, okay,
But
it
all,
doesn't
but all
work.
the fakeness at the same time, I think, are steps back, right?
Yes,
But in some interesting way, he's practicing something that I think is going to lead to more
yes.
authentic shuffles. Yeah.
It's not authentic. It's just putting a different, it's just putting a face on it. He's still, uh, his motives are not the best,
They're terrible.
right? And then, so then he got, it all fails. And he's like, okay, what's the use? I mean, he hadn't tried to kill himself yet. So now, guess what? This is depression, where he does the suicide attempts just constantly. So this next step is the depression and the suicide attempts. And this is where he's just, falling off the clock tower, taking Phil for the drive, and the other Phil, and the groundhog.
Well,
Um,
and this is indeed, we've found a more lower low than
yeah,
before. He really has hit bottom here.
yeah. And it does, it tracks, just because, yes, trying to commit suicide is definitely lower than just being a hedonist, or going after whatever you want, or seducing somebody. But then we see this next little step when none of that works, and he's just like, plain honesty. I'm just going to tell it like it is. And he sees a little bit of, I think he sees some changes in the other people that reflect his change. And when you see that reinforcement, you're like, oh, you know I will keep doing this. And that's when he actually becomes Rita's List. And he goes full bore into all of that that learning and education and becoming an expert. And at the very end, we just see this wonderful guy. He anticipates everybody. He's got this whole party going. He's got just everything happening. And he really, truly is that guy. I mean, that's a huge leap, honestly. He is right up there. And he has accepted his fate at this point,
Yes. And which then releases him.
which is what releases him.
Yeah,
About that
so I hadn't even thought about it before net right now that I had thought before that Phil makes the biggest power change that you can, being clear at the bottom, as low as you can go, and then becoming completely aligned with more higher normative moral society. But I hadn't even thought about that until right now, that he made that through shuffles, little tiny shuffles. What was somebody estimated how long he was in the time loop?
Yes, 11,931 days. So the equivalent of about 33 years.
That's a lot of shuffling.
Yes, technically there's only 38 days on screen and 414 days that were actually mentioned.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Well, that is such an amazing, wonderful example, and one of my favorite movies. My example, my favorite, is a little more serious, but still just such a great example of shuffling, and it's Hidden Figures. So here we've got Catherine Goebel as our primary norm breaker at the bottom, and she's, because of Jim Crow law and just the times of the 1950s and 60s, and being a woman and Black and a very male, not NASA environment, she's at the bottom of the totem pole, although she's probably one of the most brilliant minds there in the room. And at the very top, our system character is Mr. Harrison, and he runs the Space Task Force. And they are just so focused on trying to beat Russia to get a man into space. And it's not that Mr. Harrison's a bad person. It's not that he's overtly racist that we see in any way, shape, or form, but he's not paying any attention to Catherine. She's what's called a computer, and she's just there to check data, check up on people's math figures to see if they're correct. And if she does her job, great. But, if she didn't do her job, she'd be out of there in a minute. And, but it's just so interesting because you start to see him take little shuffles down towards her. And it's not, I don't think it begins with great altruism. It's because he can see her value and her intelligence to getting his end goal of getting someone up in space. I think it starts there. I think it becomes more humanized later. So he will invite her in to, he'll actually turn to her and ask her opinion in a meeting.
See this as, I love the phrase, it's kind of a dangerous phrase, but a rule is no substitute for a brain. And I see him applying that. His rules are, he only knows what he knows.
And I agree with you. I think that sums up his personality, or his character, is that he may be a highly moral person. We really don't know him personally other than his leadership in NASA. But we see him doing what it takes, and if that means breaking the rules. So later, when he finds out that she's having to walk like a mile to go to the colored bathroom, he takes a crowbar and he knocks that down, because that's keeping her from her very important work.
Down the bathroom.
He's a pragmatist. Yeah, he's practical, and he throws away the colored coffee pot. And so we see him shuffling down towards her. I don't know if he like swoops down and changes allegiances and really gets on her side and champions her.
No, he doesn't.
But he's shuffling down, and in that process, doing what is practical, which is, racism is not a practical model for anybody. It's mucking up all kinds of systems, and it certainly is mucking up NASA's. But what's also really beautiful is Catherine Goebel's doing the same thing. As he's kind of shuffling down, she's shuffling up. She's claiming little bits of power for herself as she can. So she'll do things like hold the redacted paperwork up to the light so she can read underneath the blacked out things so she can get the figures that she needs to figure out what's going on. She asks to be in meetings. She keeps typing her name onto reports
One of my
when
favorite
her
parts.
supervisor kept telling her, you don't get to put your name on the reports, even though she did them. He gets to put his name on the report. And she starts pushing to be put into the big meetings because that's where things are happening and that's where she makes an impact. And finally, Mr. Harrison has her come in because it makes the most sense and she really has an impact. And she becomes a really integral part of getting Glenn forward up into space. So I love that movie, and it's just a really beautiful example of people from both sides shuffling up and coming together in a really great cause, but also in that cause making some headway for women and for people of color.
Yes.
So,
Such a feel-good movie. I love it.
yes.
Well, so there we go. That is our faves for Power Shuffles, and we hope you enjoyed it. And we hope it gives you some new thoughts, some enlightenment in your own stories.
Yeah, and look for shuffles around you in your life and in the movies or in a book. They can be a very handy tool for a writer because they're probably one of the more realistic ways to shift power in a movie because it's kind of how we operate on an everyday basis.
And
Thanks for coming to the Lightning Zone.
thank you.